All right, guys. So Pete Carroll gave another press conference earlier today, a little bit ago. Went over some things, and I'm gonna make another video going into it because that's what's happening with this team right now. We just gotta, if you pay attention to the stuff Carroll says in these post game press conferences, I feel like it becomes pretty obvious how lost he is and how much this needs to end. How much all this needs to end if you really listen to what he says. And I understand there might be some people who watch my videos who are sick of all the Pete Carroll stuff, and I understand that, but it's not going to stop, okay? Like, there are a lot of things wrong with this team, but to me, the biggest thing is Pete Carroll. And to me, the biggest obstacle we will have in trying to get better again is to get away from Pete Carroll, is to get somebody else. So when he says stuff in a press conference that gets my attention and makes me want to comment on it and makes me want to strangle him because I'm so irritated by the stuff he's saying, then I'm going to talk about it because I feel like that's going to be the thing the next couple years. Can we find a way to get Carroll out with all the money he's due, with all the guaranteed money he has, basically, because I'm pretty sure coaching contracts are fully guaranteed, and with all the power and all the legacy he has in Seattle? Can you get him out? As far as I'm concerned, that's it. Like, yeah, I think Wilson needs to go. I think Schneider needs to go. A lot of these people need to go. Most of these players need to go. But I don't see nothing getting better if you can't get Carroll out too. So if you don't like it, then I understand. Go watch somebody else's videos for a little bit. But I'm going to stay on this stuff. And I'm not even going to talk about the stuff where he says, like, I'm not thinking about 3-7. I'm thinking about finishing this season 7-0. And which, whatever. It's irritating to listen to. It is. But I understand that he's going to try to continue to win games. And he should. He probably should. I'm not going to expect him to go out there and say, no, we're going to try to lose all our games. We're going to go 3-14 and give the Jets the top 3 pick. No, I don't want that. I don't want him to do that. So I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about some of the stuff he says about what he's going to try to do going forward and some of the things that he says that people probably give a little too much credence to. Okay, the first thing we're going to go over real quick just at the beginning here is something that I'm actually not mad at Carroll for because there's nothing to think about it. There's nothing to say about it. Seahawks didn't really give any injury updates today because they don't have to because their next game is Monday night. But DJ Reed well practiced today. Carroll did say that. So if you're looking for a little bit of good news in the lead here, DJ Reed well practiced today, which increases his odds of playing against Washington tremendously. And DJ Reed's best game last year as a Seahawk was probably against Washington, so it'll be cool to have him, I guess. Okay, so you got Greg Bell here, and he's talking about Alton Robinson. Or, well, he's tweeting about Pete Carroll talking about Alton Robinson. And I've talked a lot about Alton in my videos. I think he's got upside. He's got talent. I think he showed some really positive things last year in limited time. I think that he showed me some positive things in the first couple games of the season, and we haven't seen a whole heck of a lot of them. Granted, when he gets on the field, he doesn't do a whole heck of a lot, but he doesn't get on the field that much. So Pete Carroll said of Alton Robinson, we want to see him in passing situations. He's going to get more turns. And then Greg Bell correctly points out that Robinson has deserved to play more throughout his 2 seasons since Seattle drafted him. So is it just me, or does this comment sound like Pete Carroll is not part of this organization? When I read this comment from Pete Carroll, it sounds like he has no control over whether or not Alton Robinson gets on the field. Am I in bizarro world where Pete Carroll isn't the absolute biggest power holder in this organization, where he can get whatever he wants whenever he wants? He isn't basically the head coach / GM. If you want to see Alton Robinson more in passing situations, then why isn't he out there more in passing situations? You're playing Rasheem Green 60-plus snaps. You're putting Benson Mayowa out there for 60-plus snaps. You're putting these guys out there who we know aren't that good, who we know are not going to be here in the future. So, what is it? Does Ken Norton put a gun to your head on game day and say, you don't get to play Alton Robinson or I'm going to shoot you? I can barely take Carroll seriously when he starts talking about stuff like this. This is not the first time this year. Earlier this year, I think it was Corbin Smith asked him, why didn't Ryan Neal play against the Rams? And he was like, I don't know. He basically said, I don't know. Yes, you do know. You're the head coach. And you're not like a glorified coordinator who just happens to be the head coach. No. You have full control over pretty much every aspect of this team. I see stuff like this and I don't feel bad for Carroll anymore. When he storms out of a press conference because he's mad, and then he comes back and starts basically crying about how I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. You don't know what to do because you're a doofus. You act like you have no control over Alton Robinson being able to play in passing situations. You got a guy on your team who might be part of the future, who might be a really good player down the line, and no, you'd rather play guys who are not going to be here. Benson Mayowa, he is what he is. We all know exactly what he is. John Boyle on Twitter also had this from Carroll's most recent press conference. Pete Carroll said his relationship with Russell Wilson is the best it's ever been by far, says they're closer because of everything that happened in the offseason. This is actually kind of an interesting time for him to say this, because number one, Wilson had a press conference, I think it was yesterday, where he basically said, I love it here. I don't want to leave. I'm happy here. I'm not going. I don't want to go anywhere. Da 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 da. And I had some people. We were talking in stream last night about that. And then you have these comments from Carroll. What would the word be? And then you juxtaposition. You guys know what word I'm trying to say. I don't know how to use it with that tense. You contrast that. Let's just use that word, contrast, with Carroll's comments on, I think it was Monday, where he basically said a lot of negative things about Russell Wilson. He didn't say that Wilson was the problem against the Cardinals, but if you read between the lines on the stuff he said, it seemed to me, anyway, that he was criticizing Wilson for a lot of this stuff, why things are going bad. And we all know about the little back and forth that Lockett and Carroll had. So, don't believe this stuff, guys. It may be true. I'm not saying it's definitely not true, but don't think it's true just because these guys say it. They can't say anything else right now. Okay, Russell Wilson basically implies that, leaving Seattle has never entered in mind. You know that's a lie, okay? You know that's a lie because his camp gave the team a list of teams that he would have been okay being traded to last year. Now, whether he ever wanted to leave, that's at least arguable. I think that it probably is the case because he never would have even given that list out if he didn't want to leave. He would have just said, no, I'm not going to get traded. Don't trade me. But don't believe this stuff, okay? What else are these people going to say? All right? What, is Wilson going to go out and say, I hate it here, trade me, I don't like this team, I don't like Carroll, I hate him, get me out? No. We've got 7 games left to play, and Wilson's probably going to play in at least some of them. And there's no guarantee that a trade can even happen this offseason, by the way. There's a lot of money involved. A lot of picks would have to move. You'd have to find the right trade partner. Wilson would have to be okay with it. Wilson might be stuck here even if he hates it next year. It's possible. So he can't say anything like that. And Carroll can't say anything like that either because he's under contract for a while. Okay? I'm not saying this stuff is definitely not true and that, it's possible that Carroll and Wilson really are close right now. Maybe this is just something that's going to actually make those guys even closer, a bad season like this. But don't buy it just because he says it. Bob Condotta, this is going to be the final point I go over in this video. Pete Carroll said Seahawks have simplified offense lately. Often simplifying is the way we go to make sure we're getting enough turns and enough reps at stuff. We have trimmed some things a little bit in the last couple weeks. We're hoping that we'll reap the benefits of that. Is it just me, or is the Seahawks offense already about as simple as it can get? This offense seems pretty simple to me. I don't see a whole lot of motion, and hold that thought for 1 second here. I don't see a whole lot of misdirection. I don't see a whole lot of fancy stuff. About the fanciest thing I've seen lately was that pathetic attempt at a flea flicker against the Packers. So we're getting more simple? Really? You think that's the way out of here? When last season got derailed and your offensive coordinator got fired last season because things were too simple? You think you're going to double down on more simplicity? When the whole reason why we're here is because instead of getting an innovative offensive coordinator 4 years ago, you got Brian Schottenheimer and he made things as simple as can be? I just can't believe we're here right now where we have a head coach who actually thinks we need to make things even more simple. And then, look, Jonathan Vilma is a terrible announcer, but I was listening to some of the things he said in that Cardinals game, and there was one moment in that game, I think a lot of you guys will remember it too, when Jonathan Vilma basically said, he didn't say it this directly, but he basically said Russell Wilson doesn't know how to read a defense. So Jonathan Vilma at least played the game for a long time, so if he says something like that, whether or not he's a good announcer or not, he might be onto something there. So what I'm trying to parse out of all this is the implication that we're simplifying our offense because Wilson doesn't know how to run a more complex offense. Okay, take a look at these charts from ESPN Stats and Info, okay? This is motion. Motion before the snap in the NFL and the percentages of which teams do it the most. Okay, so motion at the snap, the Seahawks are around league average. They're at about 15.6%, so they're a little above average. But I want you to take a look at motion overall. This is motion at any point before the snap, not just at the snap. 35.6% of our snaps use motion. That is, if you take a look at all these numbers, the only team listed in this column that is lower is the Cardinals. And the only teams listed here that are lower are the Texans, the Giants, and the Eagles. So how can you get much more simple than we already are at? Why do we have to get more simple? So I'm just not seeing how this all fits together anymore. Like, the problem last year, as far as I'm concerned, a big problem was it was too simple. All you did was run go routes. All you did was have receivers try to beat defensive backs physically, just get open on them. You didn't do anything fancy to scheme receivers open. You didn't do anything fancy to generate easy completions. And now you're saying we need to get more simple. So I know this video was mostly about Carroll and the bull crap that I have to listen to from him that just gets on my last nerve. But now I'm kind of redirecting things a little bit towards Wilson. But understand that when I'm criticizing Wilson, I'm really criticizing Carroll. Carroll is the reason why Wilson plays the way that he does. Carroll is the reason why Wilson thinks it's okay to throw it into double coverage 50 yards down the field all the time. Carroll told Wilson, and nobody can convince me otherwise, Carroll is the reason why Wilson thinks that's how you play football, because he was hammering it into his head for 9 years. And now we're trying to change it, and Wilson can't change because he was doing it for too long. Okay, I think, honestly, right now, I think Wilson's probably beyond saving. But don't get me wrong. Carroll's the reason why that stuff is in there. If you wanted to undo that, you bring in a real offensive coordinator after you get rid of Bevel. You don't bring in Schottenheimer to double down on all that stuff. And now we're here with a about to be 33-year-old quarterback who apparently can't read defense and doesn't know how to just take his checkdowns. So, the negative stuff I say about Wilson, I'm really saying negative stuff at Carroll because it's his fault that Wilson plays like this as far as I'm concerned. But regardless, we can't undo that now. It's probably too late. Take a look at this chart, by the way, from, I think this is ESPN Stats and Info as well. How quarterbacks have performed when expected to pass in 2021. So basically, passing downs. 3rd and long, 3rd and medium, 2nd and long, 1st and 20. Downs where teams pass more than 70% of the time. How a quarterback performs in terms of EPA. So, you got Kyler Murray, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Matthew Stafford in the top 3. So that's super cool, by the way. That really highlights what's going on in our division versus what we have going on here. And you go down the list and you're like, okay, a lot of this makes sense. Aaron Rodgers above average, Dak Prescott above average, Brady, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen, Mac Jones in the middle. Russell Wilson dead last. Dead last. Worse than Justin Fields, worse than Zach Wilson, worse than Sam Darnold. When teams know we're passing, we've got nothing. Either the offensive line gets blasted because they know they have to pass block, receivers can't get open because they know they're going to be running routes and they can drop people back, or the quarterback can't make a play without the threat of the running game. So, I don't know. I've found solace in recent times in listening to Pete Carroll press conferences and just getting furious at the garbage that I have to hear. And I think about what he's done to Russell Wilson. I think about what he's done to players like Alton Robinson and Ryan Neal, who need to get on the field more but don't. And then Carroll acts like, I have no idea why they're not out on the field, like he's a fan. Like he's one of the dudes in the front row with all the face paint on. Like he has no control over any of that. And it makes you completely forget about the fact that you do kind of feel bad for him because this is not going well for him and he's having a hard time of things. Alright, I think that's going to be enough for this video. I just saw some comments from Carroll that I wanted to talk about. I just can't believe that we're more than halfway through this season and our solution is to get simpler on offense. We're already simple on offense. That's why we can't do anything. So, Carroll is an idiot for thinking that that's the solution. Wilson seems to me that he's part of the problem too because he can't do anything more complicated. I mean, like I said, Jonathan Vilma, terrible announcer, but he did play the game. So when he says that Wilson doesn't know how to read a defense, I'm like, well, he might be barking up the right tree there. And it all goes back to the decision to hire Brian Schottenheimer instead of a real offensive mind 4 years ago. Could have sent Carroll, you could have sent Wilson to quarterback grad school. Instead, you decided to let him get his GED throwing deep balls and running a simple offense for 3 years. And now you've got a 33-year-old quarterback who can't run a real offense. Can't run an offense that's actually going to beat good defenses in the modern NFL. It's all messed up, guys. Way more messed up than even I on my most pessimistic day thought it would be. I'm out. Go Hawks.